There's a consistent aspiration that we want a SADC region whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential of the SADC people, especially its women, the youth, and caring for children. So this session going forward, as we reflect on the technical, let me just I'm getting some symbols here and signs, and what does that mean? I can change mics? Should I change mics? All right, I'll do that. Here I come. Are you happy with me? Fabulous. It's always nice to make you guys happy. Okay, thank you. So as we deliberate in the next couple of days on water, energy, and food nexus, I just want to repeat. We would like a nexus that is people-driven. For this particular conversation, we would like a nexus that relies on the potential of the SADC youth. But not limited to that, we'll also look at the other groups like women and people with disabilities, as we have been told. And also that links to sustainable development. So this conversation is open. Don't feel restrained or constrained by protocol. I have observed it in advance. But I would like you to be open, frank. Let's have a conversation. Let's really feel free to be controversial, because that's how we encourage debate. There is no right or wrong answers, so let's respect that. But also, let's stick to time. So the presenters, if it's 15 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, it's 15 minutes. We have a bell, because we used cards before, red, orange, green, but some people, when they're presenting, they are looking at their PowerPoint, they don't see those cards. So we're going to use a bell. When I just ring a bell, it means you have, the first one, you have 2 minutes, or 3 minutes, let's say that, let's agree. The first bell is you have 3 minutes, so you should be wrapping up. And the second bell, it means say thank you, if you want to thank us. So that's one ground rule for this conversation. For those people that are actually making interventions from the floor, to the point. In my communication school, I was told that if it takes a minute to make your point, just check yourself. You may not have a point after all. So to the point, 1 minute, make your point, and let's move on. I would like to introduce the speakers. I think I'll invite you to come in front so that you don't take time moving to the front when I call upon you. So may I just invite Mr. Duncan Samikwa to take the front seats here, Engineer Gabriel Kalinga, and our keynote speaker, Dr. Emmanuel Mwendera, Mr. Edward Kabwe, and Dr. Ashwin Sitao. I hope I am pronouncing this. Okay, I've been advised otherwise. Okay, he's to join us. Colleagues, what we're going to do now is we are going to listen to a couple of presentations, a number of presentations, just to get us fired up, and then we'll have a panel discussion where we'll have the conversation and dialogue. So to start, I would like to invite Mr. Duncan Samikwa, who is the Senior Program Officer for Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resources Directorate at the SADC Secretariat. And I would like Mr. Samikwa, if you can, to really just unpack this SADC regional WEF nexus approach from the SADC perspective. Can we just give him a round of applause so we get him fired up as he comes in front? The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I'm standing in for my director, Mr. Gove, who, as much as he wanted to be here, had to remain behind to coordinate SADC Secretariat's response to the crisis in Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. For the next 3 days, I don't mind to be called director. So the speakers in the morning, when we were opening, talked about political will. The leadership of SADC has given us political will in the water, energy, and food nexus. We've got a lot of guiding tools and strategies that have been formulated to which we can speak to. A few of them have been listed, starting from the Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan, the Industrialization Strategy, Infrastructure Master Plan, the Regional Agriculture Policy, Energy Access Action, and there are so many other protocols and strategies that we can draw to. So we're not starting from zero, but we've got the political will, and then we've got the strategies on which to bank on. So why are we talking about the WEF Nexus? In the opening speeches, almost each and every speaker talked about the importance of water, energy, food security nexus. The interlinkages between the three are not new. They've existed before, but probably now the imperative is even more. Why? We've got a growing population. There are even estimates that in the next few years, Africa will have the highest number of people in the world, so too SADC. And as the populations are growing, along with it, the demands for basic services, higher living standards, are also putting pressure on resources, namely water, land, and energy. Our youth representative talked about 30% of the population being youth and 50% of them being unemployed. 70% of the total population having no electricity. As we are developing, the demands are increasing. Now, because of these demands, there is need as a region to come up with a WEF Nexus approach, which is going to promote regional industrialization, through it, processing, value chains, and improved lives. There's also need to promote the WEF Nexus approach so that we can have sustainable and economic growth, but the kind of growth that recognizes the ecosystems and where it encourages responsible stewardship of resource use. Because most of the resources that we have are getting depleted at a very alarming rate. They are not infinite. In the region, we are experiencing frequent droughts. The whole western region, as I speak now, has been dry, where about the eastern part has got too much rain. The droughts, the flooding is causing a lot of water, energy, and food shortages. This calls for a coherent policy approach in how to tackle them. These things are not new. They happen every year, actually. But what can we do to harness, to make sure that they don't become a crisis? Every time we've got a drought, it should not become a crisis. That's one of the issues that the WEF is trying to address. After we've spoken, after we've done the policies, the representatives of the youth, as well as the host country chair, said the time for talking is long gone. Let's start implementing. Now, what do we want to do as a region in terms of the water, energy, and food nexus? We want to search for practical alternatives to the depletion of resources. There's need for raising awareness, continuous raising awareness, and involvement of all stakeholders. The DDG in the morning and even yesterday kept hammering on leaving no one behind. And we're glad in this workshop that we've taken the youth and all stakeholders. We need to promote a multidisciplinary approach, no silo mentality anymore, and we need to maximize the multisectoral synergies and strength. This is why SADC is now driving to develop, or has developed, a framework, a water, energy, and food nexus that is going to drive investments and is going to be critical for guiding the region going forward. This is why we are here today. I will show the framework, but there are so many speakers after me who are going to delve into that. In the interest of time, Chair, thank you.
Thank you so much. So basically what we have there is really a quick snapshot in terms of how SADC is viewing this Nexus approach. And as he has said, we will actually engage with some of the thinking around the Nexus approach and youth SADC in presentations that follow. Colleagues, at this point in time, I would like now to get to the background paper, to the keynote address. I would like us to really understand this approach, where it's coming from, and of course also the importance of involving the youth. So we have a keynote speaker who I would like to introduce and will help us really navigate this Nexus approach so that we can engage with it better. Dr. Emmanuel Mwendera is a colleague of mine for many years. So I will be a university professor, has worked in a number of institutions at national, IMI, including IUCN, where our paths crossed, and also including International Livestock Research Institute. He is a specialist, currently is the specialist researcher in water science at the Institute of Soil, Climate and Water at the Agricultural Research Council. Right person, in my opinion, to help us unpack this concept, water, energy, and food nexus, and of course, how the youth can be involved in the concept. Can you take on the challenge, Dr. Mwendera? The floor is yours. Can we just give him a round of applause just to get him fired up? The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. When I was asked to provide some sort of background, I realized that this is a very, important area of intervention, but also that there is so much which is going on in the world. And with that, I looked at what is it that we need to share. And I think when we bring in the youth who are very important today, they are the future leaders of the region, but also they are the ones who have a lot of challenges in terms of how we actually organize ourselves. I thought, okay, let's look at the issues from the global perspective and then come closer to home in the region. Where do the youth stand? What are their opportunities and what are the challenges? And looking at the WEF NEXUS, how can they participate in that? And what are the opportunities of the NEXUS within the region? Of course, so much has already been said, but I think it's worth repeating some of those issues that we need to look at. So the presentation, I'll quickly go through the NEXUS global perspective and also looking at what are the frameworks that are going on. And we know we have a framework, but there are other frameworks within the globe. And how can the youth be empowered to be part of the interventions we are talking about? What are the strategies and what are the examples that we can actually showcase where the youth are taking part in the development of the region, but also any example that can actually illustrate the application of the WEF NEXUS within the globe, and what are the recommendations? So, just to make sure that we all are at the same page, the issue of the NEXUS, which actually means the interlinkages between the sectors, one can look at how does water get used in power generation, how does power get used in water management, and how do these sectors, how are these resources used in the development and utilization of food production. So this is the concept that we are talking about. We know we see it every day, but maybe we never realize the interlinkages and how these important resources should be developed and utilized, taking into account that when you use one, it also has an effect on the other. So those are the basics of the whole linkages we are talking about. Sorry. It's not working.
Can we have some technical support so we don't lose time?
Okay. So globally, one of the frameworks that have been developed is the one which was developed in Bonn, 2011. As you can see, this particular NEXUS framework has water as the center of the whole linkages. And it's not surprising because at that time, the water sector was more or less in the driving seat of the whole NEXUS. But we know that it is not only water. Energy can be in the driving seat, and as well as food can be in the driving seat. But we need to look at how are these interlinked. Then the other framework looks at how do we bring in climate change. Yesterday people were talking about how do we actually incorporate climate change in the NEXUS framework. There is consideration for that. And this particular one is looking at NEXUS-based adaptation framework, where you look at how do you actually make sure that you use the NEXUS to actually improvise and to provide solutions for adaptation to climate change. Then coming to the local or the SADC framework. The SADC framework actually takes into account both the previous two frameworks, in that when you look at it, you are looking at the natural resources component where the issue of climate change is also considered. You are looking at the human aspect where adaptation from the natural resources is also considered. And then you also look at the water, which was the center in the previous one, but here water is part and parcel of the linkages with the other two. So the framework from SADC actually incorporates all the others where you are looking at the importance of the natural ecosystems as well as human ecosystems. So one of the examples which we thought we need to share with each other in terms of how can this nexus be applied in a practical sense. There is a project which was implemented in Benin, and in that project, the funders of the project targeted women who normally had problems in actually earning their livelihood. As we know, women in the rural areas are the ones who normally suffer in terms of collecting water, long distances, women and girls. And this project targeted at those vulnerable communities, trying to empower them by providing solutions in terms of providing water, by giving them funds where they actually installed solar power panels, and those solar power panels were used to actually generate electricity, and also to actually pump water from the wells. That water was used to irrigate vegetables in their homestead. And one of the benefits from that project was that communities were able to improve their dietary provisions in terms of nutrition. It also reduced the labor input which normally women have to do in terms of collecting water from very long distances. It increased their income, and also there was a sustainability in that these technologies were able to be actually sustained over a long period of time because of the income that the women were able to generate. And of course, we're talking of clean energy. So this, to me, is a very good example of the nexus in practice, and where communities at the end of the scale can make use of this and benefit from it. But I think it's worth some of those things. SADC had put nexus. And also that the SADC region, within its own mandate, there is actually the issue of the integration, which they have committed themselves to integrate resource management and resource development. And within that integration, that actually provides the basis for the application and implementation of the nexus. And with that commitment, we can actually be assured, as it has already been said, that the political will is there. Therefore, let's take advantage of that. But there are also other instruments which are there at the regional level, the instrument at national level, the instrument within the water sector, within the energy sector, within the agriculture sector, which are there to actually support the implementation of the Nexus approach. And the other thing that we have resources which have not been fully utilized. The issue of underexploited Nexus resource, as we know that in the SADC region, we have about 2,300 cubic kilometers of water in a year, but only 44 cubic kilometers of water are actually abstracted. So you can see the exploitable potential which exists. In terms of the energy, we have about only 12 gigawatts which has been exploited, but we have potential of 150. And when you're talking about agriculture, 21% of the region's 225 million hectares is actually irrigated. So the potential is there. Using the Nexus, we can exploit this potential which actually exists within the region. When we look at now the challenges, again, the challenges have already been articulated, but let us repeat some of the challenges we have within the region. One of them is that the region has got heterogeneity in terms of endowment of resources. One part of the region, the west and southern part, we have very little water. The east and the north, we have got plenty of water. And hence, this diversity, this difference in endowment does provide some challenges in terms of implementation. And of course, the issue of climate change, we know that climate change actually is a threat to all other development initiatives. And the issue of silo mentality, we are saying that we are moving away from that, but in practice, national sovereignty, we have a regional integration as our strategy as a region, but in practice, there are others tend to prioritize national sovereignty over and above regional integration. And of course, the issue of governance challenges, sector plans which are not aligned. You're talking of inadequate capacity within sectors and inadequate sector dialogues. So these are some of the problems we have. Now, coming to the youth, one thing I needed to also emphasize that within the SADC, there are a lot of potentials for the youth to be empowered. How are these potentials manifested? We have a lot of instruments at national level. Most of the countries within the region have got the youth policies. Within the region, we have the charter, youth charter, you have protocol, which is there. All these are instruments that should be able to empower, to assist empowerment of the youth. But look at how are the youth performing. Now, this ladder is something that has been used to assess how youth are empowered, how youth actually get, developed in terms of sustainable development. We know that the youth are engaged in many ways, but the question is, how are they engaged? Are they engaged to be also important in terms of decision making, or are they engaged in such a way that they only are used to follow the decision of the elders? So looking at the ladder, the bottom ladder, the bottom rungs are the ones where you see that the youth are not fully engaged. The top one, what we want to move the youth up to the top where they are now fully engaged, they are empowered, they can take decisions themselves, they can be part of the decision making. And that is what we want to move. So what are the challenges the youth face in the region? Limited access to land, that is a very important challenge. Lack of investment capital, limited skills, poverty and unemployment, which is very, very rampant, limited youth representation in decision making, limited access to a range of sexual and reproductive health services, limited skills, and involvement innovations. So these are some of the major challenges the youth actually face. Now, having seen that, do we have examples where the youth have also been able to be active? Yes. There is an example which I thought we should I could share with you. There is a project in Tanzania where young people are being empowered through development, youth economic empowerment, and with that project, they are able to actually engage with each other and the elders to be able to develop potential for business management. The other example, Chair, I know, but it's important that we have a very good setting for the whole discussions. The other example, which I thought I should share with you, is an example of a young man who from nowhere, with very limited education, was able to develop technology for actually harnessing wind, where he was able to harness wind and generate electricity, but also use that harnessed wind to actually pump water for irrigation. This is a young man in Malawi who actually has done a lot, and to me, he is an example of potential for youth to actually use technology and innovation to develop to be part of the development agenda within the region. So the question now we need to ask ourselves in terms of youth empowerment, looking at the ladder, what needs to be done to empower our young people in order that they move up to rank 8? What financial services do we need to provide for the young? What entrepreneurial and technical skills and business management do we need to provide for them? What effective platforms do we need to support them on? And what innovation and science technology areas, what are the services in the health services? How does gender inequality be actually tackled? So these are the things that we need to actually address in terms of providing solutions to the challenges. For the entire region, we need to look at how do we actually solve some of the bottlenecks I mentioned in the beginning. Which technologies should be advanced in terms of the nexus? Whose risks are we talking about when we are talking of risks, trade-off? What governance structures should we put in place? Yesterday there was a mention of the nexus involves 3 sectors. Which of those 3 sectors is the most important sector? Who should drive the nexus agenda? So those are the things that we need to address. Which investment options should we take into account? And what innovations can actually guide and catalyze actions to implement the nexus approach? How do we demonstrate the benefits of the nexus approach? There are a lot of examples across, but we need to actually show them up. They must be there, flagged up to make sure that we know that there are chances of success and investors can actually be convinced, government officials can be convinced that yes, this can work, and hence they can actually secure funding for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for really setting the scene within allocated time. You have basically emphasized that the WEF approach is global, the thinking is global, but also has done a good job in actually demonstrating that it is possible. He has given us examples where this has been applied, but also really reflected on opportunities in the region. But he has also looked at the challenges that we need to discuss further in this dialogue. But he went further to look at the empowerment and involvement of the youth, and also giving examples of where that has happened in the region. And further has given us some really questions to reflect on when we actually discuss this nexus. Colleagues, I won't say much, but just to thank Dr. Mwendera for really such a thought-provocative, kind of like a provocative presentation, which is much appreciated. Can we just give him another round of applause, please? Now we would like to really get deeper into the potential application of the WEF Nexus. And we would like to look at some case studies in addition to the examples that Dr. Mwendera has given us. I would like us to just give a round of applause to Engineer Gabriel Kalinga, who is the program coordinator of the Songwe project, and would actually give us an example from the Songwe River Basin Development Program. A round of applause, please. The floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Protocols observed. Yeah, so my presentation is on potential application of water, energy, food nexus approach for the Songwe River Basin Development Program. Glad to be invited to this 9th SADC MUTLI-Stakeholder WEF Nexus dialogue. Yeah. Where do you? Sorry. I'm facing the same challenge.
Could we have some technical support just to help our colleague navigate the technology, please? Anyone?
Yeah, my presentation will be in those areas. I'll talk about the background of the Songo River Basin Development Program, its objectives, work done during phase 2 of the consultancy work, the main projects and their cost in priority order, cost economic analysis, environmental and social impact and mitigation measures, and financing strategy for the projects under the program, donors conference which have been conducted, and also implementation arrangement for the projects, current financing status, political will by the two governments, benefits from implementing the projects under this program, and also conclusion and recommendation. The Songo River Basin is for the Tanzania and Malawi countries. It is on the southwest part of Tanzania and north part of Malawi, covering 7 districts. 2 in Malawi and 5 in Tanzania. The basin is endowed with fertile alluvial soils. There's potential for economic development. And the river which forms the basin, 200 kilometers before it enters the Lake Malawi, Lake Nyasa, is part of the boundary between the two countries. And this river, as it flows from the upper catchment, as it flows towards the lake, it meanders so much because that area is a flood plain. So the meandering brings the challenges, and those challenges actually we'll see how they affect the population down there. So this map shows the pink color being the basin. The lake is there, Lake Nyasa, Lake Malawi. Malawi and Tanzania you can see. So you can see the blue is the Songo River itself. This is the meandering kind of that river. It really meanders in the floodplain. And during rainy season, it floods. And you can see the green portions there, the green, those are vegetations, and the households, you can see houses there. So they are really affected during the dry season, this lower floodplain. And as it floods, you know the consequences of flooding brings problems to people. Some people lose their lives, leave alone leaving their properties. But also there are some cases where the river, it scours the banks and changes the river course. So you can imagine being a boundary, a household or a couple of families or land which belong to Malawi becomes on the Tanzania side. Or the one which belonged to Tanzania now belongs to Malawi side. So the families there have to think about what should they do. Should they cross the new river course to go back to their nationalities, or remain where they are to keep their unmovable properties so that they maintain their nationalities or otherwise. So it's a big challenge actually. When we talk of meandering, when you talk of meandering, look at that slide. These are not 2 rivers. This is only one river, Songo River. From the left-hand side there, the river is flowing from upstream, coming down, and then it goes, it meanders so much that way. This photograph was taken in December 2017. Then after January, this small portion which is remaining, it was connected by the flooding. So that land where you can see a cow over there, that was belonging to Tanzania. Is the photographer who's sitting on the Tanzania, is standing on the Tanzania side. So after the river changes course, then that land now belongs to Malawi. So this is a typical example, but it happens haphazardly here and there. each national or each country loses the land here and there without any information. Sorry. Yeah, the area which is affected by flooding is 15,000 hectares, inhabited by 52,000 people. And the population in the Songwe Basin, which is the 341,000, 80% of them actually are really under poverty line as compared to the international poverty level as indicated there. And the population growth over there is quite high, is above the national averages, which is 2.88%. Now erosion, land degradation, and all those effects, actually they affect very much the livelihood of the people in the area, and they increase the poverty level in those areas. So adaptation to climate change and variability impacts would mitigate these adverse impacts, and also production of food and associated adverse could be solved or tackled. So it was found that implementation of Songwe River Basin Development Program as a multi-sectoral program will provide a solution to those challenges which are affecting the people over there. The objective of the Songwe River Basin Development Program is indicated there, but taking into consideration also that this program is part of the SADC Regional Strategic Action Plan for Integrated Water Resources Management, aimed at fostering cooperation, equitable sharing of benefits of the shared water causes. But the objective of the program actually is to contribute to economic growth, reduce the poverty, improve healthy and livelihoods, while reducing the socio-economic impacts which are caused by the meandering river in the communities in the flood plains, while ensuring food and energy security. This is an organization structure for the Songwe River Basin Development Program. I'm not going to dwell much on that, but you can see the two governments at the top there. The big circle is the Songwe River Basin Development Program, and under it we've got the Secretariat of the Songwe River Basin Commission, which is managing on behalf of these two governments this program. And it was agreed that on the left-hand side there you can see executing agency. This is a means of agriculture, irrigation, and water development in Malawi. It was agreed that this will be the executing agency. Although it's a program for two countries, one of them has to take a lead in terms of day-to-day communication on the implementation activities. Historically for this program, in 2001 and 2003, the two governments decided to implement a project which was funded by Nordic Fund so that the feasibility study could be done. So the feasibility study was done, and the outcome of the feasibility study, which focused as to what is the cause of the challenges within the Songwe River, what should be done, was found that in order to solve those challenges, it is important that we undergo through two types of measures. One is non-structural measure and one structural measure. Non-structural measure is more on environmental management aspects. And structural measure is to construct dams so that we can control floods, because floods is what has been bringing hectic situation downstream in the floodplain. So 3 dam sites were identified, and then it was found that if we construct a dam for flood control, definitely there's a potential to produce hydropower. There is a potential to use the water after producing power for irrigated agriculture. There is a potential to use the water for domestic use. Also, there's potential within the reservoirs to undergo, to undertake fisheries development and also tourism for the water resources or the water body which will be accumulated over there. So you'll find that all this brought many opportunities. So the challenges changing now to opportunities. So it was found that it is necessary to construct dams and undertake environmental management projects so that we benefit in a multi-sectoral way. Multi-sectoral approach then is it was found that it is important, and hence we should not have been talking of a project, Rather, we should have been now talking of a program, which is Songwe River Basin Development Program with many projects. So you can see from above there, water, energy, food security is ensured through that approach. After that, feasibility study phase 2 came up, and from there we got financing from the NEPAD, IPPF, and the Africa Water Facility under the trustship of African Development Bank, whereby 4.77 million euro was provided by the bank through those arrangements, and also the governments provided 2.293 million euro, coming up to a total of 7 million euro. And these funds were utilized to engage a consultant to undertake activities for designs and also investment preparation. The consultant undertook assignments in 3 components. One was to prepare first the shared vision 2050. Having a program which is big, you have to have a vision, because we are focusing, once we have dams producing power, these projects will be continued for many, many years, so we have to have a shared vision which was prepared. And also we had to prepare a 10-year Songwe River Basin Development Program. That means within the period, say of 10 years, we'll be having some arrangement to implement the activities within the basin. Component 2, out of the 4 components, we had a number of activities to undertake, which was on updating the feasibility study, detailed designs, and preparation for investment. So the feasibility study, which was conducted in 2003, had to be updated, and also supervision of geotechnical investigation has to be undertaken for those areas which dams are going to be constructed. Also, detailed designs for Lower Songwe Dam and hydropower of the capacity 180.2 megawatts, 2 irrigation schemes covering 6,200 hectares, together with their corresponding tender documents were prepared. As I'm talking, the tender documents are there. We're only waiting for financial resources to come to implement on the ground. Also, detailed designs for the Lower Songwe River floodplain was also prepared, and also plans for rural water supply, rural electrification, fisheries development, rural roads, sea tourism, as water resources, water-related infrastructure were also prepared. Plans for environmental conservation, capacity building for integrated water resources management also was prepared during this period from 2014 to 2015. Component 3 was about environmental safeguards. CESA and SEA was undertaken, and also preparation of the environmental and social management plans was prepared, and also resettlement action plan. Component 4 was about institutional development. This involved also preparation of the convention for establishment of a joint Songwe River Basin Commission at that project level, but also preparation of business plan for the Songwe River Basin Commission, and preparation of instruments plans for capacity building for the Songwe River Basin Commission was prepared as well. Mind you, by this time, these studies and the preparation of detailed design were being prepared, the commission was not there. There was only the governments implementing under a project management unit. Through those studies, those designs, we came up with actually 26 projects. Within these 26 projects, we decided to divide them into nine groups. The first group, which is a priority for Songwe, is the Lower Songwe Dam and the hydropower plant project. The second one is irrigation scheme with those costs which are required for construction. We have institutional environmental measures, and also we have priority infrastructure projects, which are roads, schools, and health centers. But then the next, number 6, 7, 8, and 9 projects, these are the rural electrification, social infrastructure, economic development, and the detailed design of Middle Dam. Now, these ones, actually, they depend upon the construction of the first project, the Lower Songwe Dam, which is a backbone of Songwe River Basin Development Program, has to be constructed so that you can have these other projects being in place. This map shows the 3 dam sites, the red ones, which you can see there within the basin. And also the next year, taking that on the left-hand side as the Lower Songwe Dam, being simulated that way, and down the green one, these are irrigation areas. So once you produce electricity from that dam, then water could also be utilized through the lead canals to the irrigation schemes down there. This map is showing the offtake of power from the Lower Songwe Dam and the transmission lines. The one going southwards is to Karonga on the Malawi side, and the one on the northeast is to Kyela in Tanzania, to be connected to the national grids of these 2 countries. So under this project, economic analysis was done, and that it was found that all these projects are economically viable with the net present profit, and the economic internal rate returns being acceptable. But issues of environment also were conducted, as mentioned, and it was found that most of all the significant adverse impacts can be either avoided or mitigated to acceptable limits. The financing arrangement set for this project is that we expect funding from different sources, public sector, private sector, and also innovative sources such as the climate financing institutions. Also, problem again. Implementation arrangement for the projects is divided into 3 parts. We've got the lead projects, we have major projects, and economic development projects. The lead projects, these are conservation, natural resources management, institutional capacity building, rural water supply, and community development. Then the major projects are Lower Songwe Dam, hydropower, and irrigation and drainage, also including priority social infrastructure. But also the economic development plans, these are the ones which are dependent on the dam. These are small and medium industries, fishery development, and tourism. With number 1, lead projects, this one we've started implementing, we started the preparation after getting financing from the NEPA IPPF, and we expect this coming April we'll start implementing on the ground. The financing for this, the lead project, which is called the Strengthening Transboundary Cooperation and Integrated Natural Resources Management in the Songwe River Basin project, is financed by Global Environment Facility as a grant, 6.4 million. CREDIF also is providing some financial support there, 0.2 million GBP, and euro 0.1 from SIWI. And also the governments are providing 1 million US dollars each, all for the period of four years. So the implementation will take 4 years. There are 4 components of this irrigation schemes, which I think there's no need to go through them on the interest of time. But also I have to come now to show the commitments by the 2 governments. When I say political will, it is indicated through the following, that these 2 governments, there's a joint ministerial declaration which was done in 2016 in Mbeya to finance, for community to finance the program. Also, Tanzania and Malawi have a joint permanent commission for cooperation, and specifically for that of March 2017, which was conducted in Lilongwe, they indicated a high priority of implementation of these programs and the program. Also, memorandum of understanding for phase 2 to be implemented was signed on 18th May 2017 in Lilongwe, but also the convention for establishment of the Joint Songwe River Basin Commission was ratified by both governments in 2017 and came into force in July last year. And now the Joint Songwe River Basin Commission was officially launched on 11th March 2019. I know time is not on my side, but I'm on the final slide here. I wonder if we can Yeah, the final slide here shows the benefits from implementation of the project under the program. We have that if we implement this program, whose documents are already, all studies are already there, there will be an increased access to water supply and sanitation. Over 460,000 people by year 2025 will benefit. This is water, W. Increased access to electricity for 60% of the population in the basin, and the entire 2 countries will be also observed. This is E, the energy. Increased irrigated land and crop yield, whereby 5,500 farm families in the basin are going to benefit. This is the F, the food. Reduced frequency and magnitude of floods in the floodplain, where a relief of 2,000 people will be observed. This is socio-economic and also political. But also employment of 5,244 full-time jobs per year in the agriculture sector, and 5,560 and 3,000 person year during construction, and also during operation and maintenance for 50 years, respectively, for both agriculture and the hydropower plant will be observed. This is economical, but generally, again, enhancement of livelihood for the people living in the basin will be observed. This is socio-economical, and improved cooperation in the transboundary water supply between the 2 governments will also be enhanced. And also cooperation between the communities within the basin themselves will also be enhanced. Conclusion. I would like to conclude saying that the approach set to implement the Songwe Basin program simultaneously ensures water, energy, and food security, and the efficiency of natural resource use in the region, and thus meets the objectives of the WEF NEXUS approach. But also the approach to implement the program ensures sustainable and integrated water resource management and development within the basin, while the design of Songwe River Basin Development Program, we can consider that it fits well within the WEF NEXUS approach, and it should be followed as an example with other approaches. And here, finally, the strategies that will ensure the role of youth in achieving WEF structural security in the SADC region should consider inclusion of the approaches adopted by the Songwe River Basin Development Program. This chart here, you well know it. This is how the Songwe fits in. I don't want to repeat, but you can see the figures where Songwe River Basin falls apart. So I say thank you for your attention. Asante sana kwa kunisikiliza. Zikomo kwa mbiri.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Engineer Kalinga. What he has succeeded in doing is basically to say that for those doubting Thomases, to say that where political will exists, strategies, plans translate into bankable projects, and there are partners to support it, it is possible. And that's basically one of the case studies on WEF approach. But you know, the WEF approach should also result in job creation. And I would like to get some experience from the Batoka Gorge hydropower project, where they used a job toolkit that was developed by the Program on Infrastructure Development in Africa, to just demonstrate how the WEF approach could also result to job creation. Could you just join me and give a round of applause to Mr. Edward Kabwe from the Zambezi River Authority to walk us through the experience from Batoka. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, moderator. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing us to be here. Particular thanks go to SADC for having enabled us to come here. Obviously, we thank the sponsors, but also I would like to recognize the support we are receiving from NEPAD. I'll be presenting on the PIDA Job Creation Toolkit. PIDA is the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. It's a program under NEPAD. And NEPAD is the new partnership for Africa's development. And I'm delighted that I've been joined by colleagues from NEPAD Mr. Abdu there, and Mr. Tichakunda Simbini, they are seated up there. Maybe you can just wave to the crowd. Thank you, Tim. So I'll be presenting on the Job Creation Toolkit, again linking it to the WEF NEXUS and picking it from how Batoka Gorge Hydroelectric Scheme is moving to use the Job Creation Toolkit. But before I talk about the toolkit, just a few things about the project itself. So that's my presentation outline. Basically, I'll talk about Batoka, go into the toolkit. Obviously, we are here to talk about the WEF NEXUS approach and dialogue, so I'll try to link that. About Batoka. Batoka Gorge Hydroelectric Scheme is a 2,400 megawatt hydro project power, quite massive. And it's being developed by Zambezi River Authority. Zambezi River Authority is a bilateral institution jointly owned by Zambia and Zimbabwe to develop that part of the Zambezi River that runs between the two countries. The Zambezi River starts in Zambia, goes out into Angola, comes back into Zambia, then runs between the two countries as a border, then goes out into Mozambique. It's that part of the Zambezi River which runs between the two countries as a border which we control. And coincidentally, it's that part which is endowed with gorges. And you know, when you have rivers and gorges, then you have an opportunity to generate hydropower. We already have the Kariba Dam, already producing power. Again, cooperation between the two countries. Now we are moving to the Batoka Gorge, which is a subject of my presentation. Then, in terms of where we are, we've conducted feasibility studies, technical, environmental and social impact assessment, as well as transaction advisory. The Batoka Gorge is being developed under the build, operate, transfer mode type of PPP. So we have already issued expressions of interest, so we are into the procurement stage. As you are aware, this is a transboundary project, but beyond that, it's also a regional project, because once we generate this 2,400 megawatts, we'll be using it beyond the two countries. And that said, we are receiving a lot of support from SADC through SAP, as well as PIDA, as I mentioned. Under NEPAD, you noticed when the Global Water Partnership was presenting a lot of projects, Inga, Batoka, Ruzizi. So those are priority projects under PIDA, and Batoka fits in there. So we are receiving a lot of support as a priority project. There is also a lot of political will in terms of developing this project. The two governments, in their own national plans, they have profiled this as as national priority project in the two countries. So as we develop Batoka, Batoka is upstream of Kariba Dam. Kariba Dam is a huge dam and a huge lake and a huge reservoir. Batoka will have a fairly small reservoir. These two will be operating what we call conjunctively. So in the event that we don't have a lot of rains, we are going to run the Batoka as we store the same water in the Kariba Dam. So as you can see, that is using water sustainably, so that when we are off rain season, then we can be emptying the lake, well, running the Kariba Dam downstream in the time that we don't have a lot of rains. So just to show that by developing the two dams, we are going to use water of the Zambezi sustainably. Obviously, yesterday we are being told about the projects that were assessed under NEXUS. Batoka was one of them. And then just to share with you that the Batoka is quite preferred by investors because it has a low carbon footprint. We won't displace anyone. You know, with hydropower dams, when you are doing ASIA, we always look at the risk of displacements of people and so on. For Batoka, this is quite favorable because it will be contained in the reservoir, 50 kilometers downstream of the Victoria Falls, but the dam height will be such that we won't affect the Vic Falls. Obviously, as we develop the Batoka, we are working with the African Development Bank, who have been nominated as the lead arranger, and working with all those partners that have put there. The Batoka Gorge is coming on with a very good tariff. As you know, in terms of the region, in terms of tariff, we talk in the range of 10 cents per kilowatt hour, but the Batoka is coming on with the estimated cost of 3.2, which is quite good, which means any investor can go in, develop the dam, make their money very easily, because that's quite low, and the estimated cost is around $3.6 billion. As I've said, we've already done the environmental studies, and as it is being developed, other projects are also coming on, like the Zizabona, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, Namibia transmission, ZTK, Zambia, Tanzania, Kenya transmission. Why I'm bringing this up is because once you develop power in terms of hydropower, you need to transmit it. When you transmit it, you need to sell it. So these projects are also being developed at the same time, such that when you have Batoka, it will be easier to sell the power beyond the two countries to the region. So again, it has a very strong social returns. Just about Batoka, but then let me go to the toolkit, which has been supported by NEPAD under the program of PIDA. The toolkit is a service provided by NEPAD to catalyze a new African jobs focus in the development and cooperation of African infrastructure to maximize the number and quality of jobs. So the idea here is that when you are developing a project, you can choose to just let things run on autopilot and people are employed and then you are reacting, but you can also choose to be proactive, to have an instrument that can tell you how many jobs will be created, what range of jobs, so that you can have a proactive intervention, so that even as you are recruiting developers, in your request for proposals, you factor it in a way such that it also talks to you getting not just jobs, but quality jobs, also talking to the challenges of the youth. So you can factor that in so that when you go to tender, we are then going to say, we will look for that developer who is going to talk to our aspirations in terms of job creation. That's what the toolkit does. This toolkit is not coming out in isolation. It's talking to these mandates coming from NEPAD's interaction, the African Union mandates, the Lome Declaration, Africa Talks Jobs, and the SDGs. So, Mr. Moderator, I hope you're not counting when I'm stuck. You also stop your clock. So the PIDA job, and I hope it has started counting now. The PIDA Job Creation Toolkit is a software that has been developed, supported by NEPAD, and we've got professors in America that have got this huge document that we provide inputs in it. It runs all the scenarios and iterations, and it gives us outputs. So, as Batoka, we are privileged to have been the showcase, because this toolkit will be used beyond us. All PIDA projects will use it, but Batoka Gorge is privileged to be the showcase. So it uses the national input-output tables. It talks about all the jobs from preparation, right now we are already creating jobs, up to the point when we'll be running in terms of power generation. That is the whole life cycle of the jobs. Then it also provides labor market information. It also serves an advisory tool for job creation interventions. So the objectives of the toolkit I already talked about, maximizing jobs, and then looking at the alternatives and interventions that needs to be put. But what's most important, when we're talking about the number of jobs, and politicians like this, you know, they'll come and pop up with a number. That project will produce 20,000 jobs, and it's in the newspapers. The beauty with this toolkit is that should anyone try to interrogate that number, this toolkit will provide empirical basis of coming up with that number. And as you are moving the project, you can refine so that you can validate the numbers. So this is more or less like a scientific way of coming up with job estimates. So what type of jobs come out of the toolkit? We have direct jobs. Direct jobs are jobs that are created by the project. You get the EPC contractor, you are going to get people working right at the jobs, so those jobs will be created and they will be called direct jobs. But you'll note that when we are developing Batoka, we're going to have suppliers. And for hydropower projects, just as an example, cement is a very, very big input into that. So by way of developing Batoka, we are going to have a lot of supply of cement, and therefore the suppliers of cement in the two countries are also going to create jobs. Such type of jobs are called indirect jobs. People will be eating, people are going to have fish. Those suppliers to the project are indirect jobs. However, further, when we develop the Batoka will be sold beyond the two countries, in the two countries and beyond the two countries. By way of increasing power generation, even say into South Africa, more jobs will be created. So those are called secondary jobs. But before we go to secondary jobs, we have what we call induced jobs. Induced jobs are the jobs that will be created by the spending agencies of that project. So you can see the classification of jobs. To summarize it, there are direct jobs created by the project, indirect jobs, which are jobs created by the suppliers of cement, steel, to the project. That project to employ people, that will be getting salaries, they will be spending on bread, that bread manufacturer will create, so that spending effect, those are induced jobs. But because we'll have more electricity generated, 2,400 megawatts, we'll have a spin-off of industries beyond the two countries. Those are the secondary jobs. So the toolkit brings out all that. I've already spoken about secondary jobs, I don't have to repeat. And just to indicate that the whole purpose of the toolkit is also to minimize leakages. Because if you, we went to Ethiopia, supported by NEPAD, and Ethiopia acknowledged to us that when they started the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance project, they didn't prepare the cement industry. So what happened is that when they started the project, they started importing cement. And that was a lot of cement, but guess where the jobs were being created? They were being created in the countries where the cement was coming from, isn't it? In these two, we call those leakages. So the idea is to prepare the suppliers beforehand. So in the next week, next 2 months, we'll be having meetings with the suppliers of cement in Zambia and Zimbabwe to pre-alert them so that they can even retrofit their industries so that we minimize those leakages. Thinking ahead. So when we ran the toolkit, these are the numbers that we got. I talked about direct jobs, indirect jobs, induced jobs, but you can see the huge number in terms of secondary jobs because those are now beyond the two countries. And these can be validated. We double-check the input, and we come up with output, and anyone who wants, we can always validate these numbers. Obviously, I've already mentioned about Batoka being a showcase, and the toolkit is being used, obviously, as an example for now, but it will be used beyond the two countries because other PIDA projects will use it after we have used this toolkit. I already gave an example of the cement industry. We are going now to have a PIM, Project Information Memorandum, to talk to developers. We will make sure that this toolkit feeds into the PIM so that any developer who is going to think of participating in Batoka will tell them, please make your money, but also look after us. We want you to demonstrate how you are going to develop the toolkit. In our assessment of the proposals, we will see which developer will give the highest number of job creation potential. That's the developer that we are going to nominate. Then we also have the 5% agenda from NEPAD. This one talks about, as we develop the toolkit, we make sure that we also use as much as possible domestic resources to avoid leakages. There are a lot of institutional investors that we can use to provide money within the two countries. So the domestic resource mobilization agenda of NEPAD, again, is being used to amplify the toolkit. I'm going towards the end. I've already talked about the resource mobilization. Cooperation with NEPAD, I've already talked about that. In conclusion, I'm lucky no bill has come through. In conclusion, the Batoka Gorge Hydroelectric Scheme, it enjoys being used as an example of the transboundary project, not just transboundary between Zambia and Zimbabwe, regional as well, and that's why we are getting support from SAP, NEPAD, as well as continental, because we are going to sell power beyond Zambia and Zimbabwe. We are going to use the toolkit to ensure that we talk to our policymakers. We are going to have a huge conference in May, supported by NEPAD, where we are going to call the suppliers, the government policymakers, the funders, everyone, so that we socialize them to this toolkit, so that even the governments, are they going to their parliaments? We also see to what extent we can intervene to make sure that those policies talk to job creation. So we are trying to be proactive, both technically and at policy level. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really, thank you so much for sharing that, and really within the specified time. Much appreciated. But colleagues, what this, as we discussed, what this presentation has done is not just to make claims of success, but be able to quantify and use credible data to actually demonstrate that we are really making a difference and that using the WEF approach. So let's take that as we engage with this further. You know, the whole concept of job creation under WEF also requires a kind of like a reflection on industry. And our last presentation before we start talking is unpacking the fourth industrial revolution and its applicability within the WEF thinking and how it can also lead to job creation. And to actually lead us into that, I have Dr. Ashwin Setal. Excuse my Malawian accent on your name. I can pay for it later. But he is from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Sir, the floor is yours. Tell us more about the fourth industrial revolution. It really sounds, it can make one get fired up. Are my expectations in place? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Program Director, and greetings everyone, and particularly my fellow panelists here. I didn't mean to desert you. It's just that when you're local, the problem, the office tears you away from some of the events. So I just arrived a short while ago. And Program Director, I've often, well, I've told him the last time when I saw him, he's the preacher, eh? So you will pray a little later, but you got my name right. Thank you, Hastings. All right, it's been kind of music to my ears to listen to the fellow presenters talk about jobs. So what do they say, like water, water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink, and jobs, jobs everywhere, but we still talk about unemployment. And particularly, it warms my heart to see the kind of jobs being created, whether these are direct, indirect, induced, secondary jobs, etc. And like my colleague said, the politicians like the numbers. Lovely. But the reality is sometimes very different to the numbers. And I think, what do they say, lies, statistics, there's some saying that goes with it. But let's interrogate this. So we heard about the numbers of jobs. And I think what I'm going to try and put a spin on is what are the types of jobs? What are the skills required to perform some of the jobs? And within the context of the WEF Nexus, it's good to see some of the direct jobs being created, in terms of infrastructure, either the construction side or the operations side. And as we said, the services industry that now has to provide the ancillary services that go with the communities that one gets. Yo, this thing is sensitive. My word, where am I going? Backwards or forwards here? Ah, there we go. All right, so one of the things with the fourth industrial revolution is that you've got to be techno-sensitive. Now, unfortunately, I come from a generation that was before computers as well, but we'll try and get there. My presentation structure, folk, is actually fairly straightforward. I've got 50 slides and I've got, Hastings, less than 15 minutes now, eh? Yeah, okay, it's a tough call, this. All right, so fasten your seatbelts. I'm not going to go through all 50. That 50 is there just for your information. And I think the difficulty with a presentation like this is how do I make it relevant, contextualize this, but also pick up on what I'll call the key pointers or the key areas that we need to focus on within the fourth industrial revolution, within our African situation as well. So I'd like to upfront start off with acknowledgements, and you can see why I've done this. And some of the key literature that actually deals with the fourth industrial revolution from the jobs and the skilling perspective and what it means to the economies, and also how it affects or how it relates to the WEF NEXUS, water, energy, food security. I mean, the very simple context, the third or the second industrial revolution was high production. So most of the big nationals, multinationals, and international companies went to where there was cheap labor and quick production. And that's what they wanted. They wanted the meat, pardon me for using that, but basically the flesh of the people who could now produce so that they could generate the profits. That time's changed. With the technological advances we have now, you don't need people anymore. Now you need machines and technological tools. And that's the big difference. Because then that translates into, let's see if I can get the pointer right here now. Where on earth? Here we go. All right, so the seminal documents I've referred to, and funnily enough, in the SADC region, we actually have an industrialization strategy and roadmap. A very good and well-compiled document. One or two things I'm not entirely happy with, but it's not a major criticism. But there's an emphasis that that's a personal feeling that needs to come through in one or two of the action points, particularly relating to jobs and skills. And we may touch on that as I get to the end. But the global competitiveness reports from the World Economic Forum. So a lot of it is actually very good philanthropic work that's been done by the World Economic Forum in relation to the fourth industrial revolution, and particularly the Future of Jobs report. And that's a key one because it examines country situation, it examines regional situations around the world as well. But notwithstanding all of that, the global risks report that's also come out has strong linkages to all of this. So my job here today, if I can get this right again without being too, where do I point this as a matter of interest? Down there or down here? All right, it doesn't matter. So the context and perspective, I'm going to dwell on this. All right, just a bit about myself. I've been involved, funnily enough, in the water sector for close on 4 decades. Skills, I've worked at a university, I've worked in government, I've worked as a consultant in the private sector. I now work at, as you've heard, the CSIR. It is a public sector research institution. It's actually nice kind of getting in and trying to also analyze and connect the dots and pull things together. And among the 3 projects that I'm currently involved in, one is at an AU NEPAD level, but it's funded by UNESCO, by UNESCO and the European Commission, and that's looking at technical skills, particularly in the water sector. Another one is FETwater, an acronym, originally started off as a UNESCO-funded project, but now run by, I see some of my colleagues, or ex-colleagues from the Department of Water and Sanitation are here, called the Framework for Education and Training Program in Water. And then from one of our sector education and training authorities, but doing a skills supply demand forecasting model, which we're busy with. But it's actually very difficult. I've got to put this down because at some point I start to run dry, and the coffee doesn't help. Yeah, on the skills supply demand forecasting side, that's much better. One of the issues we have in South Africa is the local government struggling to perform its service delivery mandate. And is it an issue of skills, the type of skills, and what is required? So this model in a data scarce environment is actually a very difficult one to construct. But just from a perspective thing, where are we? Are we on land or are we at sea? And I think quite often that perspective becomes important. We're not quite in the fourth industrial revolution yet, or maybe we are there partly, half a toe in that water, and now we're looking for that land. But maybe we're stranded somewhere and we're looking for that boat out to sea. And I'll talk about that little conundrum in a little while because that also talks to the context and perspective. All right, so this is my job. Like I said, coming through the various decades that I've been working, I look at data, I look at information, I look at the knowledge that's generated. So what you're seeing here today is not my work. It's not original mine. It's done by other people, but my job is essentially to connect the dots. It's to look at what's been done. Is it relevant? Is it good? How does it relate to our situation? Locally, here where I live and work, in my country, on my continent. And that's the kind of thing I've tried to do in this presentation, is pull this together, right? Connecting the dots. But a nice thing about this is that we have lots of pockets of knowledge, like I said. Those documents I showed you are what I call synthesis documents. They pull this together. But we also have people within the spaces that we operate that have a lot of experience. So they can draw on that knowledge, couple that with the experience, and hopefully we can come up with, I didn't do that. I mean, I pressed a button. You see, that's the problem with the fourth industrial revolution. When the technology fails, it fails big time. For those of you who've been subjected to data theft, what did I do here, guys? Ish, man, thank you. Okay, like I said, when you couple that knowledge and experience, hopefully it's the same set of dots. Just connecting it differently gives you a different picture. And I think with the fourth industrial, this is one of my favorite pictures, by the way. I use it quite often. I think one of the things that we need to understand is we are dealing with various complexities. But it's very easy to make complexities and complicate them even further. It's very difficult to take complex things and simplify them. And I think one of the big things you've heard, well, ever since I've been alive, is that this big generational gap. I find it very difficult to relate to my dad when he worked for 45 years, but he ran 3 companies that manufactured shoes, and I said, how on earth can you do that, Dad? You know, you've promoted so many people. And I wasn't like that. So I worked for 10 years in one place, 16 years, and then 2 and 3 years after that. It made sense to me. But I come from this generation. In my family, I've also got this generation. I've got this generation. I think there's a last one called Generation Y. And I tell you, it's a lovely challenge. Keeps me on my toes, but it makes this presentation very, very relevant. I've got a daughter who's in primary school, and where is this thing? Okay, we're going to get around to this. We're talking about what the fourth. I suppose most of you know what the fourth industrial revolution is, right? No. Okay, there's a slide. Read it at your leisure. But essentially, the first one was, as you can see, the projection's not very good. Steam-based engines. Second industrial revolution was electrical, energy-based, mass production. The third industrial revolution was computer and internet-based to the latter part of last century, but that's an extension into where we are now. The fourth industrial revolution, dealing with things like artificial intelligence, information technology. And this thing written at the bottom here was a project my one son has. He's in final year computer engineering, and he was given an assignment to actually do what is the fourth industrial revolution. And as he says, it blurs the lines between humanity and technology. And therein also lies a moral dilemma that we face with. It's very easy then to get mixed up in what it is. I told you about my daughter who's also in primary school. It's a this is a World Economic Forum statistic that 65% of the children entering primary school today are going to work in jobs that don't even exist. Yeah, it's frightening. Right, but then I've got an even younger child. God, how do you prepare them? How do they think is what you need to skill them into. But you'll find those skills you're actually going to deal with in a while. But like I said, my colleagues have presented some of the projects, some of the programs they're involved in that generates a lot of jobs. So one of the positive things coming out of the fourth industrial revolution is that there's a net positive growth of about 58 million jobs. You'll see where that number comes in a while, if the right labor policies are applied. So you've seen the toolkit, you've seen other instruments that are there, we're moving in the right direction. I think if I look at what we have in the SADC region, we've got a lot of our basic building blocks in place, so we are moving in the right direction. But importantly, and this is where leadership becomes very, very key. Not everybody wants to be a leader. How do leaders shape a holistic job creation strategy, shape it, but more importantly, how do they implement it? Right, I am not going to go into this, but this is from the 2019 Global Risks Report. For those of you who haven't had a look at it, it's out already. But you'll find one of the big global risks is unemployment or underemployment. So, in South Africa, for those of you who are in the banking sector, you know there's one of our big 5 banks that's shedding 2,000 jobs. They employ 20,000 people in South Africa, globally 50,000 people. I was chatting to one of their HR strategists who's in London this week. So I reckon, is this true? He reckons, yeah, unfortunately, yes. And part of it, not all of it, part of it is due to technology. They don't need these branches anymore. People do cell phone banking, internet banking. Why do they need to go into a branch? So why do they need staff? You agree, Boniface? All right. So that's what that change is. So there is a downside to it. So while there's a positive side, you can also look at, the positives and negatives of the 4th Industrial Revolution, nicely mapped out here again by the World Economic Forum. So please have a look at that at some point as well. Innovation and productivity, good things. We spoke about that in the 60s. We're getting smart. We'll have more time to spend with our families. What happened? People started getting greedy. Rather than working 4 days a week, we decided to work 10 days a week. Why? Because you can make more money. That's the problem with things like this. That's why I said it relates to values, value systems, etc. That blurred line between humanity and technology is going to rear its ugly head again now. Right, but that's it. Like I said, inequality is also going to increase. So those who are rich and smart and very entrepreneurial will really become richer. Those who are poor will become poorer. How do you deal with that? There's got to be that power balance somewhere. And I think some of the issues that relate to the 4th Industrial Revolution, particularly from a jobs perspective, those who are doing the jobs now that are unskilled or semi-skilled, are they going to be upskilled to deal with technological type work? And that's the big issue. So let's look at Africa. Whether people like it or not, this is the continent on the rise. It has been on the rise for a long time. Some of us don't realize this. We tend to have a lot of Afro-pessimism. Other people do it better. We do a lot of things very well here. So we're blessed with an abundance of resources. You can have a look at that, the various countries. It's by no means exhaustive, but that's just over where our population sits. We'll have an aging population, but right now we sit with a very young population, and that's from a 4th Industrial Revolution jobs economic production point of view is bloody good for us. All right? And that's a positive thing we need to enhance rather than decrying the fact that, hey, we've got high fertility rates or whatever. That's going to change. It will change as our quality of life changes as well. But this is something people often forget. Your key resource, ask anybody involved in organizational strategy, where does most of your expense go to in terms of your, if you do your balance sheet? 60% of your income goes into salaries. That's the people that you pay. And your people are your biggest resource. All right? So 2 things, we're blessed with an abundance of natural resources, but we're also blessed with a lot of people. And the trick is, how do you harness that second lot? Dealing with people is another one. But I'm going to move on from this, and that's why I said this is an African context. One of the big issues we have on our continent is basic needs. So it's nice to talk about where we're going with technological advancements. Hastings, how many minutes have I got? Yeesh, like, I'm only on slide 5. Sorry, or 50. All right. If you look at it, like I said, you can't really see this, but amongst the big issues here, people without access to improved water as in supply, the big bubbles are in Africa. We also need to get our basics right. The earlier slides I showed you, one of the projects I'm involved in, skill, supply, demand forecasting in local government, that relates to this. We need to get the basics right. Our people can't be looking at all of these fancy things in a 4th Industrial Revolution if they just don't have water that is accessible. And I'm not talking 200 meters in terms of our original RDP stands, I'm talking about where they are. If you can do all these fancy advanced technological things, why can't we get those simple things right? And that's one of the big issues. Same with electricity. I mean, it's like I'm in Batoka, Gocho is down there. I look at this, we can actually supply the whole continent by some of our mega projects. Why aren't we doing it? All right? So somewhere that leadership may be lacking. But you can see we haven't made much of inroads. This is about 52%. We've only come down to about 32%. We haven't made much inroads. We have, but not as much as it ought to be. All right, I'm not going to go into our water challenges. That's my pet hobby, dealing with that. But you'll see there's a whole lot. Land degradation, climate change coming on is going to create problems. We already have problems. The floods we just had in Mozambique with Kahora Bassa and all of that. So I think the point I'm trying to make here, the fourth industrial revolution is upon us. Yes, well and good. Let's not take our toes out of the water. We need to get our feet wet there. But equally, we need to get our legs sorted out in terms of how we do just basic sustainability and basic service to all people. All right, and the time to act, as you can see, is all now. Critically, when it comes to jobs, is skills. I'm not, like I said, I've got these slides. It's for you to read at your leisure. Sometimes we get the competence and the skills, academic training versus vocational training. It all gets a bit muddled up. So bear in mind, it becomes important. You might have, I think we call something called recognition of prior learning. Somebody who might not have been to school but knows how to do a job properly. That's, you've got to recognize he may be even better, he or she may be better than somebody who's just got this fancy PhD in some field but still can't do the job properly. All right? So competence and skills relate to all of those. Just to give you some, we spoke about politicians like numbers. Who are the skilled people in terms of our workforce in South Africa? It's 25%, a quarter. Managers, professionals, technicians, that's where they are. Almost half our population is semi-skilled. These are the clerks, the sales and services, skilled agriculture, the craft, kind of the secondary industries that we were talking about earlier on in the previous presentation. And then low-skilled, that's your basic labor, elementary, domestic workers, etc. That's about a third of our population. All right, I'm not going to go into this, but I'll give you a sense of the kind of training that is happening. TVET is tertiary, vocational, I forget, all right, my brain's running a bit ahead of myself here. These are institutions, your tertiary institutions like universities, your vocational colleges, etc. And you'll find that a number of the occupations where people are being trained relate to fourth industrial revolution type occupations. This is scary, and this has been our labor trend. The thing I wanted to show you here, is the important thing here is that yes, a lot of the graduates are being employed, but look at our unemployment rate. It's going to creep up with more of the jobs that are being shed in the mines and in the banking sector here. All right, that 58 million you saw, for those of you, and you don't need to be a mathematician here, 133 minus 75 will give you 58, all right? And you can see there's a net positive in terms of the numbers, in terms of by the year 2022, 3 years from now, these are the top 10 emerging jobs. But having said that, on that side, the top 10 declining jobs, and these are your, I'll call it production line type work, capturing data, all of that kind of stuff. Right, so those of you who, I don't think any assembly factory workers here, how many of you guys are administrative or accounting people in the house? Whoa, you're in trouble, but all right. But that's basically what's going to happen. All right, in sub-Saharan Africa, okay, Hastings, I'm going to wrap up. But again, if you look at something that I found quite astounding, is that it's not just technical professions that are going to grow with the fourth industrial revolution. Human resources specialists, data analysts, there's a positive trend. Financial advisors. So you'll find that the spread of occupations or jobs that are required are also going to change. All right, you can look at the country profiles, but the important part of this slide is here, the emerging skills. And you'll see you need analytical thinking and innovation, creativity, originality, and initiative, critical thinking and analysis, reasoning, problem solving, and ideation, emotional intelligence. Totally different skill sets to most of what, to what many of us have now. This is in sub-Saharan Africa. You can see the emerging job roles, but importantly, the skills types remain the same, leadership and social influence. All right, the man stood up, so it's dangerous. All right, but we were talking about change, right? This cartoon illustrates, so who wants change? Yay, we all want change. Who wants to change? We don't personally want to make the change. Who wants to lead the change? Everybody leaves the room. Sorry, Hastings, I've got to put that. But a kind of simple thing, Abu Dhabi, very hot area, growing agriculture in discarded containers, right? But this is complex change. I mentioned complexity earlier on. There are 5 building blocks to dealing with this: having the vision, having the skills, having the incentives, the resources, and an action plan. I showed you the SADC action plan for the 4th industrialization strategy. It's there. I do believe we have the resources. The incentives, I think we still have to be very clear about what these might be or what these are. I don't see that very clearly in the document. Skills, we do have them. Let's bubble those up a little bit, right? I think we have the vision. So there's a couple of things sitting in here that we need to work on a little more, and that'll give us that change. Otherwise, this is what you're going to get: confusion, anxiety, resistance, frustration, and false starts. Right, but you can have a look at that. As I said, Socrates, you see ancient wisdom in a modern situation, nothing changes. So I told you, my job is just to connect the dots. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but on embracing the new. All right. I'm not thinking, I'm kind of doing here, Hastings, sorry. And you can see the thinker is thinking, so what do we do? The doer is going to move. He's going to do what he needs to do. Somebody that put out an article recently, I think this was January, and talks about African leaders' roles, skills needed for a technologically advanced future. You can have a look at this. We spoke about leadership. I mentioned this at the beginning. It comes throughout. The action plan, I'm not going to talk to this. I've highlighted some of the key areas within the SADC action plan. You can have a look at that table. All right, I've got a problem here in that with the job, the human assets. As you can see, I've been naughty here, program director. I've highlighted that, but I think we need to have a little more of an explicit focus somewhere in this roadmap. All right? So, Kadani, you can nail me afterwards. That's all this. All right, here's my closing remarks. That's Chapter 5 of this. Right. Klaus Schwab, the founder, executive director of the World Economic, actually put it down very nicely. And this is what he says. And Hastings, will you indulge me, sir? Just to read this, all right? Neither technology nor the disruption that comes with it is an exogenous force, as an outside force, for those who don't know what that meaning is, over which humans have no control. That's not true. All of us are responsible for guiding its evolution. We talk about the 4th industrial revolution, we can also evolve it in our own space, in the decisions we make on a daily basis as citizens, consumers, and investors. We should thus grasp the opportunity and power we have to shape that 4th industrial revolution and direct it toward a future that reflects our common objectives and values. And that's what we need to do as SADC. That's what we need to do as Africa Rising, as in our 2063 agenda. In the end, it all comes down to people and values. Right, I'm not going to go, I'm going to leave it there because I mentioned people and values right at the beginning. But some of my take-home messages were very simple. I'm saying drop the political boundaries. I'm saying we're going into SADC, you know, one common passport or whatever we call it. But these artificial political administrative boundaries, I suppose they're important, they have to, but I think we can gain more through shared collective intellectual capacity. Maybe the private sector, our youngsters who actually have a lot of programs. And that's what that compulsory community conscription I'm talking about.
Give a round of applause to Dr. Seta. What you have done is to provoke us enough to get into the conversation. With the 4th industrial revolution in mind, that it's driven by data, information, science, and knowledge, not just emotions. But as we do that, making sure that we place people and values at the core. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to open the floor for questions to the panelists. We are going to go straight into the dialogue. And then the questions that you will have for the panelists will be part of the dialogue, and I'll call on them from the audience to actually respond. For now, can we just give a round of applause to our presenters? And may I then invite you to take your seats. Thank you so much. And as we do that, I would like to now invite us into a conversation, which I will moderate. But because it's lonely up here, I would like to invite colleagues to join me as panelists, just to help me with the conversation. And may I invite, therefore, Madam Chirufsha Chileshe, Regional Advocacy Manager from WaterAid. Please, it's lonely up here. Come and join me. And Paseka Lesalang, our young, enthusiastic colleague, could you come here and really represent the youth? And I would like to invite Madam Jennifer Jasmine, Director General from the Department of Economic Planning in Seychelles. It's lonely up here. I need company. And may I also invite Mr. Robert Ngonden Sakala, Director from the Agriculture Sector, and this is the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I'll invite from the SADC Secretariat, my colleague, Moses Kameli, Senior Program Officer, Energy. Please join me in front. Mr. Trevor Shongwe, Acting Director, representing the water sector, representing the WRTC. Are you in the house? Please join me in front here. Mr. Joseph Kalowe Kamo from the Warm Heart of Africa, Acting Director of Energy Affairs in Malawi. It's lonely up here. Let's have a conversation. Colleagues, this session is just a dialogue. I said earlier on, and I was worried a bit that it was becoming a workshop, that this is not a workshop. This is a dialogue. Let me just go through my list and see if I have, may have missed. Are we good? Yes, we are good. All right. What I would like us to do is to reflect a little bit on what has been shared so far, and try to unpack and understand the water, energy, food nexus. Does it resonate? Are we heading the right direction? Is this the way to go? Are there some questions? That's what I would like us to engage. But because we are discussing this within the context of youth involvement and empowerment, I would like us also to reflect a little bit on how do we engage the other players, marginalized groups. And maybe on that note, I would like to ask Paseka, you have heard it all. You have heard the presentations, you have heard the provocative presentations that we have just been through, but you have also really understood the political kind of like pitch in terms of the thinking from the leadership. Could you just, I'll give you 3 minutes. And colleagues, let me just, we don't have much time, so I had promised you, I'm sorry about that. I had promised you 5 minutes, but can we now just do 3 minutes so that we can have a conversation? Paseka, tell me, what do you see listening to all this? Do you see the role for the youth? Or you just would like to leave these old guys do it on their own and you do your own exciting stuff somewhere? Do you see the role?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Good day to the ladies and gentlemen. Protocol observed. Yes, I do see a role and a place for the youth. Much has been said, and it is with gratitude that in all the presentations, the youth were at least mentioned. Most often than not, we are seen but not heard. And besides being heard, our opinions, if heard, are really taken into practice. So I foresee our role in this particular platform being 7 particular roles and places. One is participants. Secondly, ambassadors. Thirdly, innovators. Fourthly, mentees. Fifth, apprentice. Sixth, employers. And 7th, employees. So in no particular order, from what has been discussed, the youth have a way to fit into the entire value chain. As participants, we can clearly see that none of these good notions can be put into practice without the youth intervention. Yes, at this point in time, the leadership as is our honorable leaders within us and those absent. But beyond them, there needs to be a proper handover to the youth, and that's where we will have our ultimate role. But we are proposing that let that handover start sooner rather than later. And let us not view it as a handover. Let us view it as an apprentice. For us to be the best, we need to learn from the best. So we are not challenging the current leadership. We are pleading to be taught how to lead so that we are in a better of position to play our role.
But let me ask you, actually, I like what you have said there, but let me ask you a question, and you can challenge me if you like. You know, sometimes I get a feeling like you guys are not ready. Are you ready to be, you're talking about apprentice, you're talking about handover. Are you ready to rise to the challenge? Sometimes when we talk about leaving the planet for the future generation, talking about you, the youth, and then on the other hand, we read we look on the TV and see some students demonstrating at some university in South Africa, and what they're asking for is to have a pub, beer on the campus. I kind of feel like when we leave this planet in your hands, it will be gone within 2 days after our departure. Are you rising to this challenge?
I do not dispute the fact that some of us have tendencies which are somewhat within our era. However, there are some of us who would like to take the role seriously. So in a nutshell, as lawyers would say, it depends, okay? Yes, it's not all of us, but if we could consider what we have at this point in time, we have the youth with a lot of energy and a lot of time. And then we have our leaders with a lot of experience, but a little bit of intolerance towards these youth who have a lot of energy and time. So if this energy and time is not well constructed, it ends up in beer parks and. So here is a great platform for us to engage each other, where we can develop these apprenticeship programs that I'm referring to. Remember this, we also need to make leeway for trial and error. We can't just ride the bicycle from day one. We all know we're going to fall along the way. We need to experiment. We need to be open-minded that this is a transition. You need to guide us in order to lead and for you to be comfortable to hand over with assurance that this world won't be gone in 2 days, as you put it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So the challenge, absolutely. He really does deserve that. The challenge is on us. How do we provide this apprenticeship so that we leave this planet in capable hands, so that they can meaningfully engage, and that's the conversation we should have. They can meaningfully engage in the water, energy, food nexus. Madam Chilufya Chileshi, excuse my Malawian accent, but we are neighbors, so I shouldn't really be excused. You have heard it all. Fourth Industrial Revolution, and really our colleague there was very provocative there. You've heard it all. Nexus. I like this term, Nexus, you know. You have heard it all, and you have heard it all, the PIDA toolkit. I just want to get your views. How do you think all these affect women, men, and of course the youth differently? Do they resonate with you? How do we bring a gender lens to this?
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, indeed, we have heard a lot, but I just want to bring us back, Chair, to the statement that you repeated at the beginning, because it really struck me. This point that we want SADC, the progress of SADC, to be led by its people, especially its women, youth, and care for its children. And I really would like that to be our resounding motto from this meeting, because if we use that, and then the gendered lens is important because it helps us to problematize this a little bit, and I'm going to try and do that in just a minute now, because water, energy, food, with a gendered lens, what I'm hearing is all of this discussion and investment in water going to mean that our women have access to clean, safe water, Are they going to be able to care for their children and their families? Is it going to give them economic opportunity like men have and improve the prospects for men as well? If it's going to do that, I'm delighted. I think about energy, and we've been told that about 50% of our people very soon will not have access still if we continue at the pace where we are. But is this discussion that we are having now going to translate in households being able to manage their affairs, women in particular that we know lead the affairs of homes, being able to produce more because of increased access to energy? The food aspect. And I like the graphs that we saw from our keynote speaker, but I got a little bit concerned at some point because we were talking about the value of food and energy being interconnected and food resulting in more energy production and vice versa. But we have to, and I say I'm problematizing at this point because we have a vast number of our children stunted in this region, well up to 50% in some countries. And if the water, energy, food nexus helps us to address these problems on a practical level for our children and for our women, then I think we are really having the right discussion. Lastly, the discussion around the fourth revolution, for me, is important, but I would say as we evolve the fourth revolution, industrial revolution, we have to ensure that equality, gender equality in particular, is one of those norms that guides that evolution. We have to think about the jobs that are being created. If you look at the PIDA toolkit that's been created, that's been shared here, are they the kind that will empower those that have suffered disadvantage in the past? And here we're talking about women, youth, and other marginalized groups, whether it's people with disabilities or the elderly. Are we ensuring that there's adequate affirmative action that enables things like procurement be deliberately done from companies and institutions that are run by women or youth? Those are really practical things that I think we spent the whole day yesterday in our gender discussion really thinking about, and happy to see that those should be on the discussion today.
Okay, some questions there to the audience that we should engage with, but if we don't engage with, I'll come to you and ask, from what you have heard, how do you answer those questions? But it's a very good question for consideration. You're looking at me, I'm looking at you, and yes, I'm coming to you, Madam Jennifer Jasmine. You are coming from economic planning, and really sitting here and listening to the Nexus, listening to job creation tools and the industrial revolution. How does it resonate with you? Is it relevant to your sector? Is this something that you want to be hearing coming from these three sectors?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. All protocols observed, good morning, and thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in the discussion. To go to your question, since yesterday, the topic of discussion has resonated very well with me, coming from the economic planning sector. Basically, it is the things that in our own country, speaking from my country's perspective, it is something that we have been reflecting upon, and we are trying to localize in our national development strategy. Just to share with you, we are in the process of finalizing our first NDS, and this is based on 6 thematic pillars, and environment, sustainability, and resilience is one of the thematic pillars for us. And because Seychelles, we recognize that though that we have been a champion in climate issues, we have the potential to harness more sustainable and cost-effective energy solutions. And as we expect our energy demands to rise, and given in line with our country's development needs, we believe that the WEF Nexus approach will allow us to look more strategically at how to exploit avenues towards these challenges. And also it allows us to adopt and mainstream climate change, gender issues, and also the regional and international global commitments into our plans, which involves that Agenda 2063. The SDGs, the Paris Climate Change Agreement, And from the WEF NEXUS, it allows us to promote the collective cross-sectoral perspective into the plan. And with regards to the fourth industrial revolution, and from the very good presentation we received a few moments earlier, my take on that is that there will be the advantages and also drawbacks, but it will mean that stakeholders from the planning perspective, stakeholders from different groups, and that will be government, private sector, as well as the academia, to work together so that we adopt an innovative governance approach so that to improve the lives of our people and to have a very broad base and adopt a responsive and responsible way in which we could catalyze and adopt against culture resistance.
Okay, so glad to hear all that, because you see some relevance to this, and I think to me that's a good point of departure that we can interrogate further. But Mr. Shongwe, you are from the water sector. Let's be, I mean, we've been in this business for too long. We can tell each other the truth. Let me hear from you. Is this NEXUS thing really new? Haven't we really been doing this? Is it really relevant to your sector? How would you say really this is something that your sector, the water sector, should appreciate? And I'm asking this because we have been through these cycles. We have had some buzzwords coming, concepts coming, and they go. Sometimes they mean the same. We just change a word. Are we up to something different? Do you appreciate this?
Thank you, Program Facilitator. Coming from the water sector, we note that we still have a big responsibility of making sure that the water becomes available to our nations. And from the presentations that we had yesterday, we noted that we're still far behind in harnessing the resources for our benefits in the member states. Water drives economies, energy drives economies, food is actually very important for national survival. So as we plan in the water sector, to us, the NEXUS approach, I believe has been always there, because we started with integrated water resources management and planning to some extent, where we had to include every stakeholder in the management and development of the water resource. The challenge that we have, or we had as resource managers and developers, was that water is to an extent viewed as a social good, where when you develop water resource infrastructure, basically if you're talking for potable water supply, you can't actually attract investment unless you build an economic component into the whole project. That is where we then came in and talked about issues of energy generation from the dams that we developed. And most of our dams were to make sure that there's food within member states. The agriculture then came in because they are the major user of the waters that we've actually developed. So to some extent, the NEXUS approach in the water sector has been there. It's just that now it's viewed differently. It is being introduced to the other players as well to say, come and join us. Come and be part of this big equation where we need to make sure that everyone is included in the development of the resource so that we resource mobilize and we ensure food security and energy security.
Thank you.
Facilitator.
Thank you so much. So we want to ensure that everyone is included, even the food and agricultural sector. And can I go will be with issues of water, energy, and food. Opportunities from this toolkit, job creation toolkit. Do you see that really being a reality in the food and agricultural sector?
Oui, merci Monsieur le chargé de programme. Je pense que les relations entre l'agriculture, l'eau et l'énergie sont bien connues, datent de longtemps. Elles existent, sauf qu'il faut qu'on y fasse plus d'attention aujourd'hui. parce que on ne peut pas atteindre la sécurité alimentaire sans passer par l'agriculture. Et l'agriculture est la base des économies de nos États. OK? Et cette agriculture utilise 60 à 70% des actifs. Et 90% de l'agriculture est pluviale, donc n'utilise pas suffisamment d'eau, alors que nous avons de l'eau douce, une disponibilité de l'eau douce qui n'est pas tellement utilisée, simplement parce qu'il n'y a pas d'investissement dans l'irrigation, une irrigation qui peut permettre de produire toute l'année, avec peut-être une plus grande productivité si on y associe d'autres intrants comme les engrais, etc. Et ça va permettre d'améliorer la production et d'améliorer donc les disponibilités alimentaires, qui est un des piliers importants de la sécurité alimentaire. L'agriculture n'utilise pas beaucoup d'énergie. Au moins l'agriculture, disons les petites exploitations agricoles. Parce que exploitation dans des champs, dans des fermes, tout ça. Et formation des produits de récolte. Ce qui va donner une valeur ajoutée aux produits récoltés. Et vous voyez donc, quand on prend la production agricole, on prend l'eau, on prend l'énergie, il y a moyen de faire un effort pour qu'il y ait une synergie qui peuvent aider à produire plus et améliorer les conditions de vie des ménages, dans le sens de réduire la pauvreté, augmenter les revenus et permettre à ces ménages d'accéder aux services sociaux de base.
Okay. Thank you so much. Good point there. You see the value of synergy. But I'll go to Mr. Kalowekamo, and I want you to react from the energy side. But for you, because you're from Malawi, just like me, I'll abuse you a little bit. I mean, you're my brother. You can't really revenge or do bad thing to me. I want you to just respond also. As you look at this relevance of the things that we have discussed here, do you see the place for the youth? They want to really be capacitated using apprenticeship programs to come on the space. After you talk about the relevance, I'm putting you on the spot, and I would also want another member state to just respond quickly before we go to the audience. After you, do you see the place for the youth, or we are doing fine as old people? We've been doing this. We have experience. These people come and just really disrupt things. Maybe they are leaders of the future. Let's just wait for the future. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Program Director. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak on energy in relation to the Nexus, and then also comment on the issues to do with the youth. I'd like to agree with my colleague sitting next to me here that the youth have a place to play in the Nexus. I'll tackle this in relation to the fourth industrial revolution issue. Talking about the fourth industrial revolution issue, it's about Internet of Things. Advancement in terms of technology. With this, we need fresh blends. And that can only be found in the youth. So what is required is to give our youth a chance. We need to build capacity in the youth. Yes, we need to, you talked about apprenticeship. We should provide space for that for the youth. They are the ones to lead in using this fourth industrial revolution technologies. So that's about the youth. They have a space to play. Talking about energy, the relevance of the Nexus. Thanks, Mr. Program Director, for giving me a chance to speak last after our colleagues from the water sector and also from agriculture. We are now convinced that, yes, there is need for integrated and coordinated planning for our respective projects. And let me also echo what, was it the Deputy Director for Infrastructure from SADC Secretariat? That we are all converted. So I would like to reaffirm that we are all converted now. As in the energy sector, maybe in the past, we've implemented projects without knowing that maybe those have a bearing on water and maybe agriculture by default. But from what we've learned starting yesterday, we will be taking into consideration issues to do with water and also agriculture. And we know that by doing this, we're also going to increase our chances of mobilizing financial resources, because there'll be a number of beneficiaries if we present or prepare projects as a team. When you look at the multi-sectoral dimension, we increase our chances of mobilizing resources. So we see the need for the NEXUS approach. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to, I know I haven't asked you a question. Just keep listening, because I'll come to you and I would like you to connect everything that is said in this room to what SADC policies, plans, strategies, protocols are saying. But colleagues, I'm opening the floor. Looks like there is consensus there. Looks like WEF Nexus is the way to go. There is consensus there that we need to create space for the youth. We need to apprentice, I think that's the word that is being used. You need to capacitate the youth. Can I have reactions to the presentation so far, to what the panelists have said, reactions, questions, comments, and really, I just want us to unpack this WEF Nexus and youth empowerment. The floor is open. All right, I'll start with this table, immediate. Yes, you can use the mic on your desk, on and then switch it off immediately so that others can speak. Close to the microphone, and of course also audible enough, but slow for the interpreters to be able to hear. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I just want to connect the dots of industrial revolution, youth, and so on. One of the things that we notice is that stalls progress are prejudices from the past. And whilst this happens with individuals, we have seen that in institutions as well. I think if you look at an institution that was created 30 years ago, they've maintained the same roles, they've maintained the same approaches, and we're talking about new concepts and new ideas, or a focus on emerging concepts, and still expecting the same institutions that have not reinvented themselves for the past 30 years to deliver on what we are trying to put on the table. I'm not talking about creating new institutions, because sometimes changing the players does not mean changing the game. But also this is where, for example, the youth, because they're not like you and me who begin to say 30 years ago, this is how we used to do it. And we are stuck in the way we used to do things. The young people will not acclimatize to issues based on what was happening 40 years ago. So that's where the youth comes from. But if you then go to industrial revolution, whilst industry in the private sector is changing and revolving, for example, are we seeing the same revolution in water supply issues, for example? I don't think so. We actually, when we look at water infrastructure that we're using to supply water to our citizens, it's infrastructure that was designed 40 years ago. And when we talk about maintenance and repair, we repair the same without trying to put on new innovations and renovation. So anyway, to conclude, another issue that I would want us to look at is the issue of efficiency. When we talk about the connection between the WEF elements, it still takes 3 liters of water to produce a liter of beer in the Netherlands, and it takes 7 liters of water to produce the same liter here in Southern Africa. So I just mentioned this because he talked to you about pubs and you felt a little bit bad. Even adults talk about pubs. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So there you have it, old wine skins, and we want to put new wine in it, but also looking at efficiency. I will come to this table. Okay, the floor is yours.
Bien, merci beaucoup pour la parole. En fait, je voudrais ici intervenir par rapport aux intentions des jeunes. Ils disent qu'ils sont souvent vus, mais sans être entendus. Je crois que cette fois-ci, ils ont eu l'occasion d'être entendus. En fait, les jeunes, ils veulent qu'il y ait une passation de pouvoir, donc relation de mentor à disciple. Mais je ne sais pas, en fait, s'ils ont tenu compte des défis qu'il y a au niveau de la jeunesse dans la présentation de Dr Emmanuel Mwendera, qui disait qu'en fait, il y a beaucoup de défis à relever quand ça concerne la jeunesse. Notamment, nous avons les problèmes de compétences, c'est-à-dire des capacités à relever. Il y a le problème de pauvreté et de manque d'emploi. Il y a le problème de manque de capital important pour pouvoir faire des investissements. Alors maintenant, s'il faut qu'il y ait la passation de pouvoir immédiate entre les anciens ou les adultes et les jeunes, est-ce que la jeunesse va être vraiment capable de pouvoir relever ces défis qui sont innombrables? Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. So, my colleagues from member states, I'll give you a chance at some point to just share with the group how you are taking into account the challenges that Dr. Mwendera mentioned when it comes to youth empowerment. What is it that is already happening that will help in providing apprenticeship to the youth? Please switch off the mic. I'll come to this table, but with your indulgence, I'll pick one person first. I see lots of hands on this table. This is the youth, right? Okay, I'll give 2. Let's hear from a lady.
Hi everyone, my name is Shamiso Kumbarai. I am a hydropower engineer, and I was particularly interested in Engineer Kalinga's presentation. He spoke of several large infrastructure projects currently underway in which young engineers and other technical professionals could greatly benefit in experience and skill to be ready to emerge as the leaders in infrastructure design and development. So I'm curious to find out, do programs such as these mandate the involvement of young professionals to gain the necessary skills to be able to take over eventually?
Thank you so much. Engineer Kalinga, wherever you're sitting, I'll give you a chance to, I've taken note of that, to react, to respond to that. One more from that table before I move elsewhere. Yes, I'll come back to the table later, but can we have the gentleman?
Okay, thank you. I have 3 questions, but one has been already asked about the presentations. So I will go to the 2 questions.
To the point.
Yes. One of the questions is about the presentation on the toolkit. A number of projects has been shown there, but the question is now, to what extent youth are involved or will be involved in those projects? Or to put it in another context, that if they have managed to capture the jobs for youth, those numbers of jobs have been presented. Let's have the classification. How many are for youth? to come out clearly. Then the second one, it's on the industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. My question is about how do we now get that concept clearly of industrialization in SADC, or we can see it in Africa, to connect very well with the water, energy, food nexus. Because if you go to a recent literature right now, it advocates that manufacturing contribution to GDP in Africa, it's all over the world, it's below, it's declining. Even jobs also in manufacturing are declining because some jobs are replaced by machines, robots. So how do we get that concept of industrialization very well to connect it with the Nexus approach? For instance, that's one example. The recent literature is advocating the industries without a smokestacks, that we can focus on agro-processing industries, issues of horticulture, and some countries in SADC and in East are major exporting of flowers. Also tourism and ICT information. How now can we capitalize on these kind of, on these sectors, especially youth? We can have an point in agribusinesses, in ICTs.
Point
How can
made.
you connect that one?
Point made, and I'll ask my colleague from CSIR, I'll give you an opportunity to respond to that. Okay, let me take, can I just look, I've been on one side for too long. Can I come to this side? Any comments, questions? I'll go to the, further left. The floor is yours, please. To the point.
Bonjour. Je voudrais rebondir sur la question de l'autonomisation de la jeunesse, comme vous l'avez souligné. Je pense que la création d'emplois ou l'autonomisation de la jeunesse nécessite beaucoup plus de formation et aussi d'engagement. Excuse-moi, je ne me suis pas présenté. Je m'appelle Ibrahim, je viens des îles Comores. Je suis le représentant de la plateforme nationale des jeunes entrepreneurs. Aujourd'hui, quelle est la relation qui est avec cette autonomisation de la jeunesse et l'approche Nexus? Je pense qu'il est important de comprendre que lorsque nous marchons vers l'industrialisation, cela peut créer beaucoup d'emplois sur différentes personnes. Je vous donne juste l'exemple de l'industrialisation du tourisme sur la création des hôtels. Lorsqu'un seul hôtel est créé, ça crée beaucoup d'emplois. Les femmes qui travaillent dans l'agriculture, ils gagnent. Les gens qui travaillent dans la technologie, ils gagnent. C'est tout le monde qui gagne, en fait. Donc, je voulais simplement rebondir et dire que cette approche est très importante. Mais il y a un souci, parce que lorsque les conventions sont signées et ils sont envoyés dans nos gouvernements, il y a un problème de communication. Donc la question, ce n'est pas d'établir un processus. La question est comment ce processus, les jeunes peuvent s'approprier et qui peuvent enfin relayer le relais. Voilà, c'est ce que je voulais intervenir. Merci beaucoup.
For that comment, I will also ask the panelists to field that. Especially, of course, you have the point you made at the beginning, that this will require lots of training, of course, given the request. How are we going to respond to that? We'll get back to that. Okay, where are we? Let me just look at the hands. Before I go back, can I go to Dr. Machaya there, same table, but I'll give you a chance. To the point, you may, I think, maybe, you may wish to quickly introduce yourselves. I didn't do the other side because I thought that maybe we don't have time, but maybe quickly, just introduce yourself and then speak.
All right, okay, so thank you very much, Hastings Chikoko. My name is Greenwell Machaya, and I'm a coordinator for Regional Strategic Analysis and Knowledge Support Systems, which is a program that supports the implementation of the CADIP, and we work with the African Union and based at the International Water Management Institute in Pretoria. My question, basically, unfortunately, is going to kind of lean towards some of the work we're doing on the African continent, especially in respect of joint sector reviews and biennial reviews. So these are platforms at country level that are seeking to ensure that we look at sectors not as standalone, but we are also trying to recognize the interdependence between sectors, because I think by the end of the day, that's what the Nexus is talking about. There is interdependent that is natural between water sector as well as the energy sector and the food sector. So in order to optimize the processes therein, we need to work together. So to what extent do countries, therefore, take advantage of the country level platforms like the joint sector review platforms or their likes, or the biennial review mechanisms, to come together, understand each other's weaknesses and strengths, and plan together? If it is not happening, would you please consider doing that going into the future?
Thank you so much. Country level platforms, how are we using them? I'm now going back, but before I go back, because there is a lady here, I want some diversity in voices. I'll give you a chance.
Thank you. My name is Litume Lomate. I'm one of the resource persons from GWP. My question is directed at Engineer Kalinga. When I take a scan at some of the preparatory work that was done, including the feasibility studies, I didn't see any preparatory work that was done on getting or profiling the local immediate communities that are going to host the infrastructure. And this is where the leakages normally happen, because we normally batch them as one beneficiary group when they're supposed to be disaggregated. We have the women, we have the youth. So when we talk about capacity, normally we look at the capacity of the implementers. We're not looking at the capacity of the local community that are going to host that infrastructure and use it optimally for their benefit.
Thank you so much. Engineer Kalinga, I'll give you a chance to respond to that, providing the local communities. I had promised one on this table. Could we please do that? And we'll come back. Let me just mention that there is another panel this afternoon that will focus on opportunity. Right now, we're just trying to unpack the issues. We will actually look into the house and another panel this afternoon. Tomorrow, we'll actually talk on what next, what needs to be done. So let's unpack the issues. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Thomas Shabalala, one of the graduates in South Africa from Water and Sanitation, University of Limpopo. Currently, I'm working closely with Pasega. I'm assisting him with his project management. I feel one thing is left here. It's like the water, energy, and food are the ones coming after sanitation. The sanitation aspect is not covered. Look at this. Sanitation is the most consumer of water in the house, and then it contaminates a lot of water as well. If you look at it again, you can produce biofuels from sanitation, which can contribute to energy, and you can have organic manure from sanitation, which contributes to the food. So I feel it must be included in the Nexus as well, because it's the one of the contributors in terms of fecal pollution in the dams. Even now, Val Dam was on the news currently. The problem there is the sanitation, which is contaminating the water that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Dr. Mwendera, I'll call on you at some point to just really talk about this link to healthy and sanitation. I will take one. I may come back depending on time. I would like us to go for lunch at 1:30. To the point?
Yeah, my name is Victor Congo from Global Water Partnership South Africa. On the CSIR presentation on jobs, is it now advisable to advise universities to close shops for departments like history, geography, so that we train for the future? Thank you.
Thank you so much. CSR, Industrial Revolution. Do the humanities have a place? Yes, one question here.
Muito obrigado. Eu sou Nelson Rafael, sou de Moçambique, por isso vou falar em português. Penso que esta ligação água, energia e produção de alimentos faz um casamento perfeito, porque cada uma dessas partes tem interferência nas outras partes. Do que se falou até então, penso que vale a pena ressaltar a importância da capacitação do jovem. Penso que os jovens estão interessados e já agora queria agradecer por esta oportunidade de estarmos aqui com os nossos pais para essa experiência de partilhar aquilo que já está sendo feito e de que forma a juventude pode ser integrada nesses processos. Teria sido uma grande valia, na minha opinião, que das experiências que foram partilhadas aqui tivéssemos alguma representação da juventude. O que não pude ver, vi apenas os nossos pais apresentarem e não puderam fazer referência à participação do jovem nesses projetos, nesses programas. Penso que temos que começar daí, colocar o jovem no que já está a acontecer, porque só assim é que ele vai aprendendo como é que o pai faz e como é que ele, se calhar, pode fazer melhor nos tempos seguintes. Em relação à componente da revolução industrial, penso que ela deve ser acompanhada também da revolução tecnológica. E quando falamos da revolução tecnológica, penso que também deveríamos incidir os nossos esforços em relação à formação do jovem hoje. Temos muitos cursos recentes, tecnológicos, mas que ao nível da região ainda são muito pouco oferecidos. Seria bom que ao nível da SADC, a partir desta ligação água, recursos, portanto, e energia, pudéssemos criar programas de formação ao nível de pós-graduação, para que esse jovem possa estar preparado para esta revolução industrial que também requer uma revolução tecnológica. Muito obrigado.
All right, thank you so much for that point. I will ask the panelists to field that in terms of how do we ensure youth representation, but also the issue of skills. I would take one or two more and then we'll go to respond to this. Sorry, we started a bit late, so I won't give much time to this, but there are other opportunities for us to engage on this. Any last burning issue? I'll go to the table here because just to give it a chance.
Good afternoon. My name is Ikremet Lamini. I'm from the Kingdom of Eswatini. I want to drive a point here. The future of the world is not about job creation.